What if RFID actually worked the way warehouse teams expect it to? Sonaria delivers RFID without friction with simple, operator-friendly workflows that drive fast business results. Warehouse workers want clear and intuitive user interfaces. Sonaria delivers that with practical and direct solutions. Learn how warehouse executives are cutting manual work, trusting inventory again, and improving KPIs without burdening the floor at sonaria.com. That's SONARIA.com.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, we are going to talk to Georg Meyer, who is an independent director at Assembled Products, Inc. And we are going to learn about what does Assembled Products do, and we're also going to dive into their journey of growth on the warehouse operations front. And we're going to hear a little bit about how they decided to move out of leasing spaces and how to invest in and build out their own real estate and warehouse, and also their choice to develop their own WMS and why they made that decision, and also how that has impacted their business and what they've seen from that. So we're really going to get a sense of how this company has grown over time from an operations standpoint and what it exactly means. So I'm excited to hear about this. And if you are a longtime listener, you may remember that we've actually had George's wife on the show before, reading her supply chain Christmas story a few years back. So supply chain throughout the entire family. I'm guessing over there, George. So welcome to the show. How are you?
Pretty good. Thank you very much, Kevin. And you may actually see, if you have the video, that the supply chain books are here in the back.
Yes.
I'm using Megan's office today.
I thought that's what I saw in the corner there, a little supply chain Jane, right? So good to see, and good to be talking to you now as well. So kick us off here. Tell us a little bit about Assembled Products and what it is that you all do.
Yeah, so what we do is really pretty much in the name. It's mainly assemblies and kits. We're a small company located in Iowa. We do a lot of work for John Deere and then some of the suppliers to John Deere. So one is kitting, putting different parts in bags, and
sure,
some of it is assemblies like fenders and like some pre-assemblies that are delivered. We are basically a spin-off from a big fastener distributor. We were started in 2005 and now have grown to a company that's around $20 million. I have about 35 employees. We are located in primarily Des Moines, Iowa. For a while, we had operations also in Chicago and Augusta, Georgia. But in these last couple of years, with the way the economy's been going, we've been consolidating everything into our big operation in Urbandale.
Interesting. Okay. So kind of centralizing that, which makes a lot of sense. And obviously Iowa, if you're doing a lot of things with John Deere, I imagine is a good location to be in. That's really big time farmland out there, right? So tell us a little bit about the operational setup. Like, what does your warehouse operation look like? You mentioned you have just one facility now at this point. Is that right?
Yep. So we have one facility. It's about 80,000 square foot.
All right.
And that's the majority of it is really storage. And then that's also where we have the production for all the kitting and assembly, and a small office space.
Gotcha. Okay. And tell us like a little bit about the products that you're handling. Because if I think John Deere, like I'm thinking, there might be some big items involved here, right? Is that the case?
There are some pretty big items, like the fenders I mentioned for some of their bigger machines. But there's also, we really handle a lot of small stuff. So we grew up in the fastener industry, so it's nuts and bolts, a lot of
Okay.
tiny parts. And then in the last 7 or 8 years, we also got into hoses, which is somewhat mid-size. And this flexibility is actually something we really designed our utility around.
Yeah, interesting. So tell us a little bit about that, because back in 2019, you had been, I guess, leasing warehouse spaces, renting space, right, to run these operations in, which many people do, right, because the cost of real estate, et cetera, I'm sure. But you made the decision to build out your own operation. So I'm curious, what was the kind of catalyst to say, you know what, like, let's stop leasing or renting space and let's invest in a space that we own and do that build out? What was kind of the decision point to do that?
So I think in a way it's kind of, it's been a dream. Like I said, it's a family company now run by the second generation. So there really is a desire to leave a legacy. And then in 2018, we'd just seen rapid growth. We'd taken on the hose projects. That was the year, like it was a record year. And we had won Supplier of the Year at John Deere. So it was a very exciting year for us.
Yeah.
And then we really realized we were growing out of the facility we were in, because that was still very much geared to being a distributor, not like a light manufacturer as we are. And also like the financing offers, like it looked like one of the, if we were going to build, that was the time.
Yeah. And I'm curious here, because obviously you couldn't have predicted what happened the year after, right? But did that, did that play to your advantage in any way with, the pandemic unfolding and the year after in 2020? Did that have any impact?
So I think what really helped us is, so in 2019, the building was built and we moved in and we got all the operations settled. And we finally, and we got our new system going, and we were a very efficient operation at that point. So we were really in a good spot going into the pandemic to continue doing what we were doing. There wasn't a lot of need to be hands-on and make changes in the operation at that time.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Interesting. Yeah. I was curious about that. I saw the timing and I'm like, oh, a bit like just in time, I guess, maybe. But when you look at that and when you thought about that, right, because obviously it sounds like you were kind of on a bit of a growth trajectory at that time, right? I mean, becoming the top supplier for John Deere, and it sounds like, the business was growing. So let's invest in our own space and make that happen. How did you make the decision to develop and form a space that, would be suitable for the long term, right? I mean, we're here, I guess, 6 years later now? You're still in the same space, right? I'm guessing. So, so how did you kind of make sure that, like, the space that we are going to, I guess, put our roots in and stay here for a while is going to last us for a while and be viable for the long term?
So the funny story about that is we overbuilt the facility, right? And we built 80,000 square feet at a time when we thought we needed 60,000.
Okay.
And we had a plan, and we were renting part of it out, like from the start.
Yeah.
And then, there was this crazy crunch after the pandemic was over, and then we needed all the space we could get. Like, it was completely full.
Sure.
And, now, as I mentioned, now we consolidated our other sites into it. So, but I think that was a big part is, we built bigger than we thought we needed because we expected the growth trajectory to continue.
Yeah. Interesting. And I think it's interesting to hear that kind of fluctuation, right? Which I think probably a lot of people experienced during that time period. So I'm curious, I mean, was there a time period where you're like, well, maybe we didn't build big enough? Like, we need more space?
There was. So there was for a little while, we had horrible overflow spaces. Like I mentioned, we had a small site in Chicago, and we had a building next to it where in the winter people basically had to walk, like a little bit down a hill to get parts from like the overflow place.
Oh, yeah.
It's more or less running extension cords from one cable to another. It was not optimal, but whatever it takes to make the customer happy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And the customer, I think oftentimes doesn't realize everything that's going on behind the scenes to make them happy, right? Which I think is one of the things I admire about operators and people that make it happen. So really interesting to hear about that. And now tell us about, like, because you mentioned that you moved in there and you already made the operation very efficient, right? So when you moved in there, it was running very efficiently. But what went into like the design of the operation itself? I mean, it sounds like the majority is a lot of maybe smaller parts, but some variability there in sizes. So how did you lay it out from an infrastructure perspective, from like a storage perspective? What does that look like?
So we looked at, basically we looked at our experience, and we also got external opinions. We got somebody when we got the new racking to say what is their recommended layout. We got Iowa State involved and kind of looked at what are their best practices. And then we designed, what we thought would be the best fit. So we have, which is somewhat unconventional, like different size aisles. Like we have one very wide aisle to move really large parts through if we want to. We have some cantilevers where we can hang things up, and then we have a lot of traditional racking. And then also for slower moving inventory, we decided to build some double deep racking to make good use of the space. So there's quite a bit of variety, like based on everything we've seen or that we expected could still coming. Like we thought of like how could we accommodate that.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. And so some of that racking and things like that, I mean, is it's not permanent, but it's not easy to just like pick up and move for 1 month or something like that. So how did you talked about like you overbuilt a little bit from a space perspective, but how did you think about like the layout of those different storage types to accommodate like future growth or potential flexibility if you needed it?
Yeah, so with the overbuilding, we also, overbuilt the racking. The whole warehouse was like filled with racking from the beginning, even the space that we thought we were going to rent out. Then the design, it was interesting. We got the first consultant we had come in, they sent us a CAD drawing, and we noticed like, well, some of the structural poles of the buildings would be in the middle of an aisle. That's not going to be a lot of fun for a forklift driver.
Sure, yeah.
So there were some of these constraints that we tried to accommodate. And at the end of the day, we basically used Excel, like we turned it into graph paper and like, millimeter by millimeter, like did a to scale drawing of, what if we make these aisles this wide? Like what kind of storage can we put in? And we played with a lot of scenarios and did the math on what gave us the most locations for the different types of sizes.
Interesting. All in Excel.
Yes, it was. We are extremely pragmatic, I would say. But it was funny because you had a plan at the end of the day that was, one page that you could print out from Excel with all the different colors and the aisles, and the plan made sense to everyone. We got the racking set up exactly the way it looked on that paper.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to see that Excel file. I think it's probably pretty fascinating to look at. But yeah, interesting to hear that. And I love that you're able to do that and figure that out. And I think that it makes so much sense to be able to see that layout before you start like putting bolts in the ground, I guess, so to speak, and do that. And now you also made the decision to create your own WMS versus going out and buying one, right? Was this something that was prior to that move, or this was like involved in that move too, and you had like a previous WMS, or how did that kind of come about?
Yeah, so it came about from a couple different directions. So one is my original background is software development, and actually developing like warehouse management and like logistics systems. So I had a lot of hands-on experience, and we had taken over a homegrown system from the company that had spun us off, and we made some changes to that. So we had some pretty good experience with hands-on and like knowing what skills we needed for that. And we also looked at let's say off the shelf, and we saw like the effort to customize it, or the number of steps involved compared to what we were used to, which was already trimmed for the operators, just seemed like a lot to take on. Once we figured out, okay, realistically we can build this ourselves, that was definitely the way to go.
Yeah, very interesting. So because I think it's a very interesting, I'm always interested to hear like somebody says like, well, we decided to build our own WMS, and I'm curious like the reason, because there's so many WMS options on the market, right? It's kind of like why would you build your own when there's so many there? So tell us a little bit about some of those kind of maybe unique nuances with your business or your operation where you felt like, anything off the shelf was like not going to be able to handle that, or needed further customization to be able to do that. What were some of those things?
So for one, we wanted the move to be very easy, right? So we wanted to be able to use all the existing like labeling and how we had the parts in the system already. So that was one, like we didn't want a system where we would have to relabel everything. Then we're also working closely with John Deere. We have a lot of EDI integration. And one thing that was very important to us was John Deere started pushing those VDA requirements, right? So they want to be able to like know for every pallet, if I can scan one barcode, I want to know every box that's on it with every part and every lot number.
Yeah.
And from systems we had seen, that was usually a very painful process to like put that together for a shipment. Like would take an operator quite a bit of work. And we wanted something where the system knows at all times what's on every pallet. So if you pick the whole pallet and ship it to the customer, it's basically, like no additional work, instead of like starting to set up a whole new pallet and individually doing all the scanning to it. So it was little things like that. And then also for our build process, right, that's very bill of material driven. We wanted to have some clear rules that operators cannot overpick raw parts, or be very sure, they pick the right things. So it was all of these things from our experiences that we're sure, like there are off-the-shelf systems that can do it and can do all that. But to find the mix of all of our specific requirements was not that easy.
Yeah. It's very interesting, and it's interesting to hear that perspective too, and not finding all the requirements in one, right? And I could see that being a potential. So tell us a little bit about, because you mentioned you software developer, right? Have developed some software. I guess you were instrumental in developing this WMS, right? So when you thought about it, not only from the perspective of like the business, but then also like the users that are working with it every day, you mentioned something a little earlier about like how it had been trimmed down for like ease of use. So tell us a little bit about kind of like the approach to the user interface, and how did you, make sure that when creating this WMS that, if I'm pulling these orders or these items or putting an order together, that's very simple to use and like straightforward to use. How did you approach the actual user experience of the system?
So I had the advantage that earlier in my career, when I got to build a WMS, I had a chance to work in a very similar operation for basically a week, do all the processes from receiving, shipping, driving around forklifts, all the good stuff.
Yeah.
Picking and having that experience, and also knowing the operators at Assembled Products very well, so that it was easy to get feedback, could show people, okay, here's what we're thinking for this screen. Like, let's go do some test picks, see what works, see what doesn't. So it was, we were very, very close to the people that, will use it every day. There's also a pretty intense phase, especially after the move, where we had some tweaks where we figured, some things that seemed like a good idea are actually not that good. So we scaled back some of the more ambitious features and said, let's reintroduce those once everything is stable with the basics.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think involving those workers in the development process, or at least getting like feedback from them on what they look for or what doesn't make sense to them, I think is a really important thing to do. So now tell us a little bit about kind of the approach to some of the newer technologies that we're seeing in the warehouse space? Like, are you guys leveraging any kind of robotics or AI or automation? What is the approach to that for the business?
So at this point, we're very curious. This is not a very high margin business. So, like we're very much like focused on efficiency. So we're always, exploring when we see things. And like, I think we're, thinking about like automated forklifts or something. There's probably some real potential. Now, AI, we're starting to look at using it, especially for more quality control stuff. Like there's a lot of things that we do with taking pictures and taking weights to make sure, parts are built correctly. And I think that's one area where we see potential.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think it's interesting because I guess you said you're like $20 million company, right? So you'd be like mid-market or so, maybe small business side of things, right? But I think it's very interesting to hear because that segment of the market, right, I think is starting to see, and I'm curious if you're seeing the same, right, is seeing some technologies and some of these, newer kind of next level solutions for warehouse operations, starting to see more kind of accessibility from that perspective. Do you see that? And do you feel like the options are getting larger or opening up more to a company of your size?
Yeah, I would say so. So I also do some consulting for other companies, and I see, them like working now, automating things with robots or cobots that you wouldn't have seen a few years ago. So I think the price point is definitely getting more attractive.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And what, I guess when you look at these technologies, like whether it's for assembled products specifically or just in general, I mean, what are you seeing that's out there that you think is like really exciting and is something that is like viable for the long term?
So I think there's a lot, like auto store, like, or, anything, right, that brings the parts to the operator rather than like making the operator do a lot of travel time. That I think, people are going to go to more and more because that's also fairly or like easier to automate, I would say.
And so when you look at your space, right, you have 80,000 square feet, you said, right? And it sounds like you're able to centralize that. I mean, what are some of your biggest challenges in there? Like, is it, like, do you have to keep a lot of inventory on hand to be able to supply John Deere? I mean, is it like space constraints or what do you see are some of the top challenges in your business?
So we do, keep a lot of inventory on hand because like that is one reason why we built the facility as big as we want, because that's, for one, we come from a distribution mindset. So you want to have stuff on hand and you can prevent, or you can help the customer out of a lot of problematic situations if you just have what they need. Yeah. Then, like a challenge is like, if we get work, right, that involves a ton of really big parts, right, like giant assemblies, then we would have to look at, okay, how do we arrange things to work on that?
And I think it's interesting to hear, some of the nuances of different operations and what's going on there. So obviously, very interesting to hear about kind of the shift from, having this leased or rented space to having your own space, and then sounds like navigating some very high demand points in time, which I think we all kind of face there, and how to go about that, and then looking at it from the technology, that software kind of foundational level in the WMS on what's available versus what we can do internally, and then ultimately choosing to go internal. So if somebody is kind of in the same position, right, where they're thinking about, building out their own facility versus continuing to lease, what would be some of like your advice for them? How would you kind of guide them or advise them to, maybe avoid some mistakes or make sure that they're making the right decision?
I mean, I think it's one of the most exciting things you can do if you have the opportunity to think about it. And then if your company, right, if you're very operations production focused, and this is probably the one chance to really like build something the way you want it, right? It's very rare that you find leased space that doesn't impose a lot of constraints on your operation. It's whether it's like, like does the floor hold enough? Is the building old? Or the structural pulls like in the wrong places? I think one thing we learned early on is make sure, if the builder, you decide where exactly your dock doors are going to go, because like that's one of the first things that's basically set in stone.
Yeah.
And then I would say, so for us, the key person was our director of operations and then our warehouse manager. And, like we were sure the people who ended up using the space and worked in the space were very involved in making a lot of the decisions, or had a chance to challenge also when we were thinking, like we had a big argument about like how much receiving space will we really need. Because of course, right, that's we like to use the space vertically and not just have a big horizontal open floor.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious what was the conversation there? Was like one team was like, no, we don't need that much space, and one team was like, no, we need more space for receiving. Like how did you kind of determine that? Because it sounds like at the time, right, when you were making this decision to go into a new facility, that there was still like space to grow, right? And then it sounds like you got kind of like slammed at the end of the pandemic there, and somebody at that time was probably like, I told you we needed more receiving space, right? But how did you ultimately kind of determine and figure that out, like how to allocate what percentage of space to receiving, or what percentage of space to shipping, or what percentage of space for just general storage or other activities?
I would love to say, it was super scientific and we had great models, but
Sure.
But I think part of it was negotiation. Part of it was, common sense, is like, okay, right, like what is realistically what we have to buffer? If we unload one full truck, then how fast can we get things out of the way into the storage? Because I mean, the nice thing is we're a company with a very good culture, so we could have these open discussions and disagreements.
Yeah.
And yes, somebody may say, yeah, when we're getting slammed and there's one truck unloaded and two more waiting, that, see, I told you, but we also know that's not the norm.
Yeah.
So I think we ended up pushing, probably a little more of like, let's try to be as efficient as we can, and say we can always take down like one section of racking and make a little bit more space for receiving if we have to. But we were open to try and, be like as space efficient as we can.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think that's interesting to think about that, because it's kind of, in a way, it's like you try to predict your business as much as possible, right, and forecast, but then things happen and you don't know, and it could be a multitude of different things, and then you have to kind of rework and change a little bit, and like you said, maybe take down one section of racking to give a little bit more space for receiving or shipping or whatever the case may be. So very interesting to hear that kind of like behind the scenes there. Now, if you look at kind of the future of the business, what does like scaling or growing look like? Like, will this operation suit you for multiple years to come, or how does that look?
I think in our perfect world we'll grow out of it, but
yeah,
at the moment it looks like we're definitely in a good place. For a couple of years, we have capacity to take on more business. We are, past the peak from the post-pandemic. Mm-hmm. And I think what will be interesting is, we're going to do probably more diverse business. Right now, we really do a ton for John Deere, and we love them, and we like to do as much as we can for them.
Sure.
But we're also, more branching out and seeing like, how do we take our capabilities and make them available for other similar customers.
Got it. Okay. All right. Very interesting, and very interesting to talk to you today about this kind of journey here and some of the behind the scenes and the thinking that went into, developing this new operation, and then also the WMS side as well. So really appreciate you sharing those thoughts and insight with us here too, as well, for other operators to learn from who may be thinking about similar decisions and similar moves too. So really appreciate you coming on this show and talking to me here, George. If people want to get in touch or they want to learn more about assembled products, what's the best way to do that?
Go to our website, assembled.pro. That will be the easiest. Also, we are very customer service minded, so you can give us a call at 515-278-7030, and somebody will pick up the phone within 3 rings during business hours.
All right.
And then you can get a hold of me, just George, no E at the end, Georg at assembled.pro.
All right, fantastic. And we will definitely put all that information at thenewwarehouse.com as well as in the show notes. So, George, thank you once again for your time on the show today.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Enjoyed this episode? Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast, and for more content from the New Warehouse, find us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Links to subscribe can be found in the show notes, and for everything The New Warehouse, head to thenewwarehouse.com.